Hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. Now, today we are tackling the circuit races of Need for Speed Most Wanted, specifically the circuit and sprint races of Blacklist number 1, Razor. Yes, that's right, we are finally in the home stretch, and if my understanding is accurate, we'll be tackling Razor next week. So, what can we say about this wonderful game that hasn't already been said? The cars, top notch. The world building, fantastic. The AI, questionable at times, but overall, it's definitely one of the most serviceable and most unique games in the franchise. So, where do we go from here? What is there to say about this game that makes it so unique, so beloved by the entire community? And I think the easiest way to start with that is to both look at what came before and what came after. So the Need for Speed franchise as a whole, prior to Most Wanted, was either closed course racing or standard street racing. But the thing with the closed course and standard street racing was that that was all you had. The game didn't have a open world that was as detailed as Most Wanted is. In fact, most of the one that I turn to as being still a fantastic game, but less so than Most Wanted, was Need for Speed Underground. Underground had a level of flair to it that I don't think a lot of games had at that time. It really leaned heavily into the tuners and making them into supercars. They were, for lack of better terminology, a fantastic way to introduce the world of Atlantica. I think that's what it is, or the city of Atlantica. Anywho, the point I'm getting at is that Need for Speed Underground was very segmented. Every track interconnected with one another, but you could always pick out what details of one track to the next that fit in with the others. This, however, had the open world, and they crafted the world first and the races second, which meant that playing the game as a whole was meant to offer options and traverse means of traversal across this world that just were not even considered an option in Underground because they made courses first and a city second. But let's take a quick step back here because I'm leaning a little heavily into Underground specifically, partially because that's what I know. Um, but let's go further into the future. Carbon, Pro Street, Need for Speed Heat. All of these later entries had something that I don't think people really realized was a hindrance. So, with Need for Speed Carbon, it is, unfortunately, a nighttime copy of Most Wanted. And even then, it still somehow finds a way to feel off. It doesn't have the same level of world detail that I think Most Wanted does, and that's a bit of a shame. But part of it is because the world is more segmented than this world is. You had four major areas that were relatively small by comparison to this. And it just felt claustrophobic as a result of trying to segment this world into distinct parts. To the point where they actually used the canyons on the outskirts of the city as closed course races. And then look at Need for Speed Pro Street. Pro Street, you're effectively racing on tracks the world over, but that's it. You're just, there's racing, there's building, there's whatnot, but it never felt as grand or as focused as Most Wanted was and is. Most Wanted how do I put this? Is much more down to earth and has a much more clearly defined goal than a lot of other games did. If you look at Most Wanted, look at Underground, Pro Street, Carbon, the initial situation of Need for Speed Underground was you're new to the city, you're new to the racing scene, buy a car, place or have a few races and earn some reputation. That's your goal. You want to be the #1 racer in the city, and that's it. I admittedly haven't finished Underground 2, but I would assume, based on my experiences, that it is relatively similar to Need for Speed Underground 1. Cool. So, what about Need for Speed Carbon? Carbon's basic goal starts with Darius. Darius is invested in trying to help the little guy get back on his feet and earn a little bit of cash. And he can use a little help from you because the entire city became a battleground. How he didn't find a way to demolish all of the various crews himself, I don't know. But the point is that his city is in shambles. Palmont is struggling, and it's your job to help him clean it up because he just got you out of some serious trouble. That's it. That's the story. And after each of the major bosses, it is revealed that the race that sent you running away from Palmont initially didn't actually happen the way that you, the player, had it remembered it. There was an EMP that went off, and Darius ran away with the cash. Ergo, why he believes that you, the player, are invested in him for some serious cash, some change. And I do like that about the storyline of Carbon, is that there's more to it beneath the layers, but it doesn't feel 100% natural either. That's kind of my opinion on it, is that it felt a little shoehorned at times with its storyline. Great game, good racing, but questionable story. Need for Speed Pro Street, on the other hand, has another major bonus. This game had the goal of becoming the best racer, and you were going to take down, I believe his name was Ryo Watanabe. The whole idea is you're a good racer, he's a good racer, take him down, become the race king. And that's a great idea, a great premise. But there's nothing more to the story than just becoming a good racer. And maybe there's all that it actually needed. But personally, I like how grounded this story is. This game is about getting revenge on your opponent who cheated in their race against you, getting your vehicle back, taking down the Blacklist 15. Despite not necessarily knowing what's going on behind the scenes, Mia, acting on her own accord, of her own direction, says outright that she was the one who was taking down the Blacklist 15 behind the scenes. That you, the player, are just there taking them down and getting their vehicles out of the equation. 15 racers in exchange for one. And I gotta have to say, I kinda like that mentality, that there was always more going on. But, be that as it may, Need for Speed Most Wanted has a lot more of a reasonable, I don't want to call it reasonable, I want to call it a lot more grounded or consistent story. It's a lot easier to relate to the story than in other games. Hoop-de-woofta, this is a long race, 8 minutes long so far. And we are finally starting lap 3. But, truth be told, after Pro Street, I kind of dropped the franchise as a whole. It's not that I think that the Need for Speed franchise was bad or that the games coming out were worth playing. It is simply that for a while I wasn't invested in racing games. I was interested in the edgy, dark, everything games. And now that I'm a little older and more mature, there's something alluring about the simplicity of a racer, even if it is partially enacting domestic terrorism every time you turn the key. Case in point. Um, but overall, where does that leave us? I think that at this moment in time, it's fair to say that Need for Speed Most Wanted is, in fact, beatable with only using the Lexus LS300. Is it LS or IS? I've never been able to actually properly read that. Leave the message down in the comments, because I could be doing this the wrong way the entire time. That would be a tad embarrassing, but you know, things happen. Not sure why Redline took the scenic route there, but he just absolutely demolished his chances of winning this race. Kind of a sad situation when they end up doing that. Ow. One thing that I think never really dawned on me in the early days of gaming is just how easy it is to destroy a car. Like, I remember back playing this game and going for hour and a half, 2 hour long pursuit chases for the sake of messing with the police, seeing just how long I could survive. And it was one of those things that I personally loved about the game was that every time I got behind the wheel, every time I played the game, caused a little chaos and get the police involved, there was always something to look forward to. I think the one time I had gotten enough pursuits by the time I had beaten Vic that I had a higher bounty than Razor, which absolutely absurd, but technically not impossible. I wouldn't recommend it. It takes a absurdly long time, but absurdly long time or not, it's still something of note. Um, but what I'm getting at is playing this game way back in the day, I spent a lot of time messing around and just enjoying the side story stuff. I attempted my hand at the challenge series a few times and only made it about halfway down prior to growing up, shall we say. And I gotta say that this has always had something for me to do. There's always been something for me to mess around with. And while I'm sure the younger version of me would be absolutely flabbergasted that I've been able to get through this with as much precision as I have. Seriously, is this not the third time I've driven through that thing? They must work really fast in this city. Younger me would have been absolutely flabbergasted and impressed at just being able to beat this game at all, let alone with the Lexus. And I think it shows a little bit of how we grow as gamers as well. That what originally was our goal as kids or way back in the day don't necessarily line up with our current beliefs and objectives. That's a little something for my own 2 cents there. Who put a truck there? Seriously. For shame. Anyways, 15 minutes for the first race on this video. That's pretty absurd. Anywho, we're going to get into one of the sprint races here, because why not? Gotta have a little bit of a enjoyment using every single car that we have, because honestly, why not? The point of having multiple cars is to use multiple cars. I can't believe I missed that. Um, but I think, looking at how things have gone, I don't believe that every car can beat the entire game. In fact, I believe exactly 4 of them can. That's not to say that I don't believe that every car has the potential or that these 4 cars are the only ones that have the capabilities. No. If you got cars that were a little bit faster or stronger, you could beat the entire game with them too. You could, theoretically, beat the entire game with a Corvette. But in the base non-modified version of the game, there are only 4 cars that you can truly beat the entire game with. The Lexus, the Cobalt SS, the Golf GTI, I believe it's the Peugeot 206. That feels wrong. Might be a Ford Focus. But regardless, there are 4 cars that you start with in the early part of the game. And these 4 cars are the only 4 cars that could theoretically beat the entire game start to finish. Not because of a lack of desire to do it with everything, but simply a lack of capability. You can't use something that you haven't unlocked yet. And that's kind of another detail of the later games that bugged me. So, I was playing through, I think it was Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. It was a little bit of an arcadey Wii game. And every time I got involved in it, I played, race after race after race because I wanted to buy every car in the game. The thing is that I could buy every single car in the game. There was nothing holding me back. There was no upgrading the cars. You basically just made them look a little bit fancier and off you went. But the original sense of the game, the vehicles were so easy to unlock and so easy to use on a aggregate basis that it became very simplistic to just say, oh, okay, cool, I have every car in the game, moving on. There was nothing special about them. And while I'm sure that there are certain games that I am neglecting when I'm mentioning stuff like this, the reality is that if the upgrades or if the unlockables are not challenging to get, you don't really get to enjoy the process of unlocking it. I'm gonna poke at a different franchise for a moment. Smash 64, Smash Melee. Melee had it set that you had to play the game for a certain amount of time, battle the opponent that you were trying to unlock them. Whereas future versions of the games always had this in mind, but the speed at which you unlocked them meant that you would eventually just get bored and that would be it. You wouldn't actually have the satisfaction the entire way through the game. And that is something that Need for Speed Most Wanted does well. Every single car, every single upgrade is earned. And it is earned in a way that I don't think most people really understand just how good they have it. Because Need for Speed Most Wanted has it set so that you, the player, can do whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do. And that's kind of a cool tidbit, in my opinion, that every single race, every single situation has you're moving towards that final goal of having every vehicle, of having every upgrade, of being able to take down Razor. And that's kind of the point. I don't believe that games that are super easy are actually fulfilling to play all the time. Don't get me wrong, there are some games that are ridiculously easy and fantastically fun. But the games that are like a racer, part of the enjoyment is in the challenge. And unlocking everything in a racer is incredibly difficult. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Yeah. Anywho, we are starting the third race. We're about halfway through it already. I didn't realize how much time had passed in that. And truth be told, I'm liking the odds we're dealing with. 2,000 feet ahead. Yes, the police are supposedly near. I had to open my mouth. The police are officially here, and it's going to be a pretty short race, I think, all things considered. The police aren't going to make much of a difference at the moment. If anything, they're going to be a help, not a hindrance. But be that as it may. Need for Speed Most Wanted has probably, I think, the best police during races that you get compared to any other area of the game. And what do I mean by this, I suppose? The police in Most Wanted are always involved, always trying to one-up the player, but they don't necessarily do too much during the races. They're more of a, how do I want to call it? It's an event. It's more theatrical in nature rather than a bona fide challenge. Because you, the player, your entire goal is to get from A to B. That's it. And if you don't make it from A to B, then congratulations, you don't make it from A to B. The theatrics involved with this means that the player has a chance to get away, to enjoy just playing the game. And I think that's kind of amazing as a result. The police are there, they're involved. They add pressure. They make everything feel that much harder, that much more difficult, and that much more terrifying depending on your point of view. And yet, they don't really. They offer a lot in terms of a dynamic challenge outside of races. But in races, they're more relaxed, shall we say. More simplistic. Anywho, I'm going to enjoy this because I'm pretty sure this is the last or second last police chase I'm going to have before defeating Razor. And that's kind of terrifying. I don't really want to say goodbye, but I think I'm going to have to soon. Oh, goodbye. Diggy's Donuts. So, I'm not sure if any of you have actually, or have been keeping tabs on what's going on around the world right now with the 20th anniversary of Need for Speed Most Wanted. The original actor of Razor, as well as the original BMW M3 GTR, were given a little bit of a facelift. BMW actually built the original M3 GTR to be a showroom vehicle. And the real version looks absolutely stunning. It is something that I don't think I've ever been able to say about a car before, but it looks amazing. Check it out online. I think you have a little bit of enjoyment knowing exactly what you're getting into there. Okay. The police are underway. Oh, come on. They got a helicopter? And I've been spotted. Okay. Back on the run again, I guess. It's okay. This time, don't hit the wall. Overall, I think that the fact that this game has as much love and attention given to it really shows in the gameplay, in the world, in the AI, in the fact that it is getting celebrated 20 years later. shows just how much this franchise cared about this game, how much effort and time went into this game. And so I don't believe that it has any reason to stop at this point. Don't get me wrong, I would like to see a remake, a remaster, not a remake. A remaster or a facelift would just bring the visuals up to the current standards. But aside from that, that would be it. That's all it would need. Because I truly believe that most games that go the route of a remake or remaster do too much. Sometimes a remaster is a good thing. It can make a forgotten gem all that better. All the better, and bring it back to the forefront of the consciousness. But a lot of remasters do too much. If you were to remaster, I'm gonna point at Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 here. If you're gonna remaster or remake the game and take out the Blacklist 15, you have fundamentally changed the entire identity of the game with a very simple change. Whereas taking that same game, giving it a art facelift, and leaving everything else the same, that's fine. Halo's another one that had that issue where the Master Chief Collection did the facelift, but their art of the facelift didn't match up with the hitboxes of the original game. This happens. And I understand that when you're going from a low poly model to a high poly model, that things are going to change. But the reality is that the game had so much loss just in these small differences that the game it lost some of its original identity. And that's kind of a problem. Video games as a whole every game has its own unique feel. I mentioned that Need for Speed Carbon is a copy of Most Wanted. And in that, I'm referring to how you are playing to take over the city, take down a crime syndicate of some variety. You are working towards a goal that could leave the city in a very different state than what you found it in. But Need for Speed, Most Wanted, and Carbon feel very different because of how the world is built, because of how the characters and cars react, how the police chases go down, etc. Every single one of these circumstances is notable as being different enough that the player doesn't get the same feeling out of both games. Flip that on its head. Take Most Wanted, take away its physics engine, which again is part of its identity, take away its art style, and take away its blacklist. You're left with a very generic racing game that lacks much of what made it beloved to begin with. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure we'd still find something, but small details matter almost more than the big ones. So, I don't know. Take what I say with a grain of salt, I suppose. So, at this point in time, we're running into probably the last 1 to 2 races that I'm doing today. And I gotta say, oh, nice, a lot of Porsche. Next week, we will be taking down Razor, as well as the absolute last of the original game, or of the challenge races leading up to Razor. And it's going to be one of those, it's going to be sentimental, if I'm being honest. While I love this game, I don't know if I would do another series or another challenge on it, because I kind of jumped the gun and did one of the hardest things I could think of right off the bat. And I'm kind of regretting that a little bit at this point. It's not that it's a bad thing, it's just that I personally enjoy this game. And I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see the entire game start to finish with every car. And I'm not really sure if that's even remotely possible. So, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. At the very least, I can say that this game is and will always be a gem of gaming. That it will always show off what the Nintendo GameCube was capable of in 2005. Sounds really weird when I say it like that. The GameCube, the PlayStation 2, had some of the best games to ever exist on it. And I don't think I am very far out of line for saying that. Don't get me wrong, there's something to be said for the newest, latest, and greatest games out there. But, well, I'll admit, rose-tinted glasses, a little bit of nostalgia going on. The old games always had this magic to them. They weren't built by massive, massive 10,000 person teams. They were made sometimes by a dozen guys with a love for making games, and that was it. Now, this one I think was like 100 or so. But the point being is that the number of people involved, the higher that number gets, the more generic the game is going to become. And that's kind of the disappointing reality of it. So, Need for Speed Most Wanted holding up and being what it is in its time period is absolutely amazing. Anywho, with all of this said today, if you like what you see, are curious if this challenge will come to completion, or are simply wanting to see the finale, drop a like, leave a subscribe down below, drop a comment if there is any possible side series or whatnot that you would like to see, and I'll see what I can do about it. Truthfully, I think that there's a lot more that I can do about it than people realize. The hard part is the more modern ones. I have a way of finding most older games and actually being able to show them off. So I don't really see that as too much of an issue. Anyways, drop a like, leave some scribble, and we'll catch you next time. You know, these races, this city really needs a facelift. Too many civilians, not enough racers. We need a race with like 10,000 cars on it, going around the entire outskirts of the city. We'll call it a rush hour. I'm pretty sure that's what they said for Need for Speed Hot Pursuit for the Wii. I like Rush Hour. I think that's funny. I like the idea behind it. Let's go. Oh. Why'd you slow down, Robertson? Alrighty. So, quick question. If I ran into one of the fences, would I release all the prisoners out of the city and cause the police to get really PO'd with me? Asking for a friend. Anywho. Wow, this is a lot longer race than I was expecting. Whoopsies. I gotta say that Need for Speed's got a lot of unique gameplay behind it, and I'd be amiss to say that I would love to see more. And I feel like these new engines just don't do the old games justice. And quite frankly, the heightened price tag from how much money goes into developing games is starting to become. There's gonna be, I think, a problem with gaming where because they're now getting to a point where they're saying, oh yeah, certain systems are obsolete, we're going to run into issues where the cost of this hobby is going to increase beyond the point that most people can actually get behind it. And that's a shame because vintage games compared to modern ones often don't need that kind of consistency.